So in the last video, we talked a little bit more about the philosophical underpinnings of community policing, and so now we'll talk a little bit more about the strategy involved. So when we think about strategy, right, so if our goal then is to be accountable to the public, and to have like this service mindset, and to be responsive and stuff like that, and to seek input. What are we going or seek input from public? Excuse me. How do we go about taking this, right? Because it's one thing in order to say like this is desired behavior, this is something that we want. It is quite another to actually put something into action. So in this case, then, what is community policing aim to do with it, right? So if you're trying to have this service mindset, if you're trying to be seeking input from the public, if you're trying to be accountable, then one of the most common things that is seen. Oh, I guess also there is crime prevention. I guess we can throw that in there as well, and to prevent crime from happening. One of the biggest and chief things that is seen to be as like a goal is to have more face-to-face encounters between the police and the public. That's a BT. Public and the police. So in this case, then, so what do we do with this, right? So if our goal is to have these face-to-face encounters, how do we create opportunities for this to happen? So, more often than not, right, I used to be subscribed to the San Bernardino PD Instagram page, but, there are other units, right? So if we're creating face-to-face encounters, we have to understand a little bit about how, policing currently is, right? Unless someone seeks out this behavior or seeks out these opportunities, right? Think about our most reactions with police, right? We might see them like on the news, right? There was a story of a police chase that's happening. We could, see them when we get pulled over, which is, maybe not ideal. And really, this is set up as, possibly a negative encounter. I think that's fair to say that most of us don't want to get pulled over, and when that happens, it's not usually great, right? Maybe sometimes it is, but most of the time, not ideal, right? And other times that we see them, right, or if they are, working in a security setting. For example, I went to a Rangers baseball game in the old stadium, and police that I saw there, they had like, AR-15s out, and had like body armor and helmets on and stuff like that. And I'll be honest with you, that is not someone I wanted to talk to. In fact, it was the very opposite of someone I wanted to talk to. That's true of really. Honestly, you know what? That's true of anyone I see like having a gun in public. Really, I'll be if I'm being perfectly honest. That is the wrong person. I don't want anything to do with you. If you are carrying a weapon in public. But in those police, right, it's a security kind of setting, and they are meant to be intimidating, keeping control of the situation, and that's not really necessarily like a positive encounter. And perhaps more often than not, we would also see them in patrol cars. They're roaming around, keeping tabs on traffic. Maybe they're just driving or something like that. And what ends up happening through all these, right, is that we either have a disconnected relationship So where, they're seen at a distance, they're not seen as approachable, they're maybe like a bit aloof of what's happening with like in the community and stuff like that. So they're not really seen as being, someone we can approach, right? Or, it is a source of a negative experience. So, how do we like fix that, right? So part of like one way to fix this, or at least enhance it and add another dimension to this existing part, right? Because there are going to be situations, right, where we do want police to act like this. We do need them to perform security functions at some times. We do need them to be in patrol cars at times. We need them to exist in those situations. So how do we at least add to that existing perception then, if like we are counteracting this? So, especially since, like, in these situations, right, they're not really in a position to take citizen input, and they probably don't want our input, right? Like, if someone is pulling you over for, and they want to give you a ticket, like, well, I think you're full of shit, right? Like, it's probably not, like, the best situation to do that. They're not seeking input from me on that subject, and, I probably don't want to be in that situation anyway, right? So, from a community policing standpoint, then the goal is to have positive interactions. So something, neutral is like whatever, right? We want positive here. We want something that's positive, that's impactful. So we want to have these positive interactions with police, right? That are really, pro-social, and and with these, encounters and situations, that they demonstrate that they demonstrate an ability to listen to the public, and that they're willing to be, service oriented. So they are willing to hear feedback and then respond in such a way that meets like expectations of the public, right? So we took your feedback, we listened, and this is how we responded, right? So historically, before there was like widespread internet and social media, the way officers often try to do this, right, was create face-to-face meetings. So if there was something that was in a neighborhood that was occurring, so there was a neighborhood meeting. A lot of times when you think about neighborhood watch programs and signs, the goal is to have like a police officer who is responsible for that area show up, hear what's going on in the community, and create this, at least the impression that they have the tools and capability to do something, right? So with these face-to-face meetings, right, there could be, an update on what's happening in the neighborhood. So on neighborhood workings. And it could also be, a situation where if we, have these neighborhood workings, we understand what's happening, but then allow for citizen input, and, solicit complaints. So, maybe this is, and oftentimes when we think about stuff that, people often complain about, or that they, want greater attention for, they're going to maybe complain about, signs of disorder. So if there's graffiti, if there's a bunch of trash in the neighborhood, if there are suspicious character or homeless people or something like that, right? So signs of disorder is going to be one. They might specifically have issues, about crime in place. They might also bring up issues, if we think about homeless people, right, they may also mention that. and any number sort of problems, right, that people may have, because whether we like it or not in our society, right, we expect the police to handle a lot of problems, right, even though they may not be the best equipped to handle it, right? So, for example, police aren't necessarily equipped to handle issues related to homeless populations, right? Other than maybe like arresting someone who is threatening other people, right? They're not really equipped to deal with a lot of like mental and social issues surrounding that particular problem. But we do expect the police to do something about it if we call them, right? Or if there is signs of trash and litter, and other kind of junk in an area, right? Police aren't trash collectors. They don't work for the city services department, or road construction, stuff like that. But if we complain about it, we do expect them to maybe do something about it. So it creates like this issue then, is that if we have this sense of disorder and stuff like that, even though the police may not be equipped to handle the problems, right, they are giving the impression that they are listening and that they can look into a problem and become service oriented, right? Because even though something may not happen, the fact that they're actually stopping, they're listening, maybe they're taking notes on what you're saying and something like that, right? They're giving the appearance, at a minimum, listening to the public and possibly working on a plan to rectify it, right? So if we have this in place and we're listening to the public, we can maybe do something about it, right? So one of the big parts is that before, this used to be in face-to-face meetings, but this is going to be something that can happen on the police social media account, where they're taking complaints, or they want warnings. They would communicate with the public. They use that to communicate problems that are happening in an area. Or if they're looking for more information, right? These are all situations and opportunities for police to take in, value what the community says, and then create something actionable with it, right? That's hopefully like the goal from out of this, right? The other part too is that we tend to think of police. Police used to be really, spread out. There used to be focus on like time of day, and when police were deployed, right? But increasingly, there is this emphasis on geography. So when we think about like geography, then from a policing standpoint, is that if we are trying to create opportunities for accountability and build accountability or trust, in the belief that something's going to happen, right? We want to have situations where there is some degree of familiarity, because I'm more likely to trust someone I am at least familiar with and know what to expect, rather than someone I don't know, right? Who's completely random, right? And for the most part, right, it's kind of difficult to do with police, because where I live, I don't know any police officers. I couldn't I could probably recognize a few of them since I've lived here long enough, but really I don't have any kind of connection with them. I think there's a police substation near me, actually, and I've never seen them. I don't know who goes there. I don't even know if it's open, truthfully. But with this familiarity problem, the intent of community policing is to create this familiarity and to have and deploy officers to specific geographic areas. So they take ownership of an area. They are more attuned to the problems of the area. They can find resources to it. And because, it's not just like some blank-faced police officer, we have someone that we know that we can maybe rely on, that can help us. We have more trust and faith in the police as an entity. Now, other ways that we could probably do this to get more visibility, or to make them, police seem, like we can approach them, right, There's a lot of different methods for doing that. And one of the chief problems in terms of a treatment issue or, measuring the impact of community policing is, what does it look like, right? Because really, if we're just trying to create face-to-face, kind of problems or opportunities, right? Perhaps this is meetings, right? Publicly, but this could also be social media, which is a very different thing. You will see people advocate for horseback cops because now cops are on horses and people can't pet the horses because they'll screw you up. But we have in this situation, right? Like if we have them on horseback, they're more, approachable, even though they're on a horse. This will also be the justification, for cops that are on bikes. Dallas PD, when I used to live in Dallas, used to have a community police unit, and they went to all these like public social events. I remember one time they were at a Mavericks basketball game, and they did a halftime dance show, or maybe it was at the end of a quarter or something. I can't remember, right? But they would do stuff like that. Maybe it is a coffee shop, work around something like that. So while there are a lot of different ways that you can approach this particular problem, and you guys can probably think of some on your own, the fact that there are so many different ones and they're all going to be applied differently and deployed differently makes it really hard to say what exactly is a actual program or, proven implementation of community policing that, we can generate a lot of difference in, right? Because if we put cops on bikes, is that community policing, or is that just we're making cops more fit because they're on bikes and they're more visible? Because otherwise you're just a cop on a bike, right? If we have a social media account, does that really mean that we're achieving community policing? Or does it mean that we just have a social media account because everyone says we should? If we put them on the dance floor, great, we see them dancing, does that mean, what, police are all right, I saw that goofy one dancing one day? Maybe, perhaps not, So it's something to keep in mind, at least from a research method standpoint, is that the policing, when it ends up being deployed, is very different from department to department. And when there's such a fragmented police force in the United States, in the sense, with over 18,000, it looks very differently. So it becomes very hard to measure the effectiveness of community policing because of that. So we'll pause that video here, and we'll pick this up in the